It's another cross-border initiative here.
Trying to get as many as we can in.
And we appreciate it. Believe me, a lot of good feedback on the hockey, let me tell you.
Okay, we're ready to go. So I'm going to do an introduction real quick, and then Ed will get to his presentation. Hello, and welcome to APS Stamp Chat. I am Scott English, Executive Director of the American Philatelic Society. Joining me is Ed Croft, discussing the Doar Ivri First Stamps of Israel. Stamp Chats are made possible through the support of APS members and the Mighty Buck Club. If you want to learn more about APS membership or the Mighty Buck Club, please visit our website at stamps.org. For those watching live, your microphone and camera are disabled during the presentation. You can use the chat section to share with fellow attendees. Please submit your questions in the Q&A box, and Ed will answer questions following his presentation. We're honored to welcome our presenter tonight, Mr. Ed Croft, an international level judge and president of the Royal Philatelic Society of Canada. Ed lives in Vancouver, Canada, and has collected stamps for over 55 years. He's the past president of the Society of Israel Philatelists and has been actively involved with that society for many years. Ed has written many articles for various philatelic publications relating to the philately of the Holy Land and has successfully exhibited at the regional, national, and international level. In 2012, Ed was the winner of the Regal Award of the SIP for outstanding contributions to Holy Land philately. Ed was also the 2013 Gelder Medal awarded by the RPSC and the 2017 winner of the Jennings Award from the American Association of Philatelic Exhibitors. In 2020, Ed was the recipient of the Dickstein Award of the SIP for outstanding philatelic writing and research. Ed is a member of many societies, including the APS, AAPE, RPSC, SIP, American Philatelic Congress, and Postal History Society, the Postal History Society of Canada, the Philatelic Specialist Society of Canada, BNAPS, ONAPS, the Collectors Club of New York, and the Holy Land Philatelic Society. His interests include the postal history of the Holy Land, the Middle East, Canada, and Aerophilately. In his presentation, Ed will share the commercial usages of the three high values of the First Stamps of Israel, Doar Ivri, or Hebrew Post, issued on May 16, 1948. Ed's talk is based in part on his book, The Doar Ivri Issue of Israel, Postal and Commercial Usages of the Three High Value Stamps, published in 2020 by the Society of Israel Philatelists. Ed, it's great to see you again, and thank you for being with us.
Thanks very much, Scott. Hi, everyone. I'll be happy to share my screen now. And there we go. Look good, Scott? All good?
It's all good.
Thank you. So welcome, everyone. And what I'm going to do is take you for the next 90 minutes, roughly, or a shorter period of time, through the first issue of Israel, as Scott referred to it as the Doar Ivri, meaning the Hebrew Post. And specifically, I'm going to focus on postal history and the usage of the three high-value stamps, which you see on the screen in front of you, large, bold, colorful stamps on this piece that's going to New York City. So without ado, I carry on. So on May 16th, 1948, Israel issued its first stamps. There was a 9-stamp set. The country hadn't decided on what to call itself at the time, and they didn't know what to put on their stamps. So they put on the stamps Hebrew Post because the stamps were being designed in secrecy. And when you look at the stamps, which we'll do right now, you'll see at the top there's Hebrew writing, and at the bottom there's Arabic writing. And they both are referring to Hebrew Post. We'll talk about the selvage or the tabs on the stamps in a moment, and I'll talk about what they represent. We are going to focus in this presentation, all of us, on the three high value stamps at the bottom of the screen. However, nonetheless, we're going to see the lower value stamps from time to time in the presentation for various reasons. Now, as I mentioned, and as you saw on the screen, the denominations of the stamps, of the 9 stamps, range from 3 to 1,000. And the currency was MILS, or mils, originally derived from the Egyptian currency back before 1927. And Israel, when it became a state on May 16, 1948, adopted the currency that had existed. It was the mils for the lower values, and The 1,000 was also known as £1 as well. That was referable to the British pound at the time. But on December 24th, 1948, the currency was changed to prutot. So you'll see sometimes on the screen, I referred to mils prior to December 24, 1948, and after that date to prutot as the currency of the postage that's being shown. This 9-stamp issue was withdrawn from sale on April 30th, 1950. However, in the interim, between the issue on May 16th, 1948 and April 30th, 1950, a number of other stamps were issued, and the importance of that will be reflected in the presentation as we go along. Now, as for the three high values, the 250, the 500, and the 1,000, when you look at the pictures, and I'll go back in a moment, the motifs on these stamps are old coins from the first rebellion against Rome. And on the stamps, actually, in the language that's reflected there, you will see the word Israel. And it was really the last time prior to May 16th, 1948, where you saw the word Israel actually reflected on the currency that's there. Now, the selvage, or the bottom pieces known as tabs, have writing on them, and they describe the origin of the old coins, both on the descriptions on the coins themselves, both on the front and on the back. And you'll see, for example, different motifs. You'll see pearls, you'll see pomegranates, you'll see chalices. So when we go back to the pictures, you'll see on the bottom of the stamps, that's the selvage or the tabs. In Hebrew, where the stamps came from, where the coins came from, the period of time that they were issued in, and what it says on the high values on the front and on the back of the stamps. That's the idea, was to inform the viewer as to what the viewer was actually seeing on the postage itself. Now, the Doar Ivri high values are symbolic for collectors of the Holy Land. You will always see Doar Ivri high values associated with Israel philately, often with Holy Land philately. Now, collectors like to collect all sorts of things associated with the Doar Ivri high values. They're difficult to obtain at times, and particularly on cover, and you're going to see that throughout the presentation. But what I'm trying to do throughout this presentation to excite you to collect the area. It's a fascinating area. It's great to collect, and you'll see different varieties that you can collect. So the first thing that people collect are the stamps themselves, either in mint condition or used condition, the 250, the 500, the 1,000, with or without the tabs or the selvage. Sometimes you'll see selvage that has an extra perforated layer, and it's more difficult to find a perfect tab than it is one that's imperfect in the sense that a collector or a dealer has ripped off the actual selvage on part of the bottom of the stamp. Now, people move from collecting the stamps themselves in mint or used condition to varieties. Here you see an imperfect pair of the 1,000, very difficult to find. Obviously, errors were not made readily. There are stamps that are found in imperfect form. You have to be very careful. A number of forgeries exist of imperfect high-value stamps. Here are some that are actual genuine as opposed to forgeries. We'll see forgeries in a few minutes. Sometimes people collect plate blocks, and you'll see the plate numbers on the side with different markings. You'll either see a slug, you'll see a star, as the case may be. You'll see the number of the plate up above, together with the actual plate number below. There is an extraordinary book that was put out by the late Captain Yaakov Shabtai, an outstanding philatelist of the Holy Land, and he examined the different settings, the different printings of both the low value and the high value Doar Ivri stamps and the paper upon which they were printed. If you're into this specialty, then it's definitely worth acquiring this book. If you're interested in tabs, it's a challenge to find tab blocks in mint condition, perfect condition. If you even want to go further and you want to get something rarer, you can go for sheets of the Doar Ivri high values. really, really hard to find. What you'll see more commonly are first date covers, which have all or a portion or a number of the Doar Ivri stamps upon them. This is an unaddressed first date cover. You'll see the postmark from Tel Aviv on it, and it will say Doar Ivri, actually in Hebrew, 16th of May, 1948. This is a first date cover, again, unaddressed with full tabs or full selvage. Now, some people are interested in collecting literature that reflects the high values of the Doar Ivri. Here's the publication from France. It's a Holy Land publication by the Cercle Français Philatelists d'Israël, and it has as its motif or its mascot, if you will, the high value 1,000 mil Doar Ivri stamp. You'll see an article from the Israel Philatelists, the flagship publication of the Society of Israel Philatelists. State of Israel was born May 14th, 1948, when the state was actually declared. The stamps were issued on the Sunday following. Friday was May 14th, 1948. And then you'll see the classic text, the Doar Ivri Stamps of Israel, published by the outstanding experts, philatelists, Steve Rothman, Yaakov Tzachor. That book is now going to be issued in a new edition fairly soon. It's being produced right now. The original book was from 1985. Some people will collect presentation sheets that were prepared for officials of government or collectors in certain circumstances. And you'll see two different types of presentation sheets. One was prepared for a philatelic exhibition. That's the one on the right, the Amaba exhibition in Switzerland. And the 9 stamps were either postmarked or unpostmarked with their tab values. Now, for people who could not afford the high values, or for people who didn't have access to the high values, the State of Israel put out souvenir sheets to commemorate the International Stamp Exhibition, Jerusalem 73. So it was easy to acquire souvenir sheets reflecting facsimiles of the high value Doar Ivris. They're souvenir sheets for the 250, the 500, and the 1,000. And the one that you see on the screen is the one reflecting the highest value, the 1,000. You have to watch out for forgeries, as I mentioned. Here is a forgery of the highest value in a tab block. And this is taken from the Tel Aviv Stamps catalog, the picture that's shown in that, reflecting the fact that people have to be careful. And there are nuances that you have to look for when you buy stamps that you believe are genuine and stamps which are forgeries. So certificates often should be obtained when you're buying high-value Doar Ivri stamps that you're paying a lot of money for, and they're in tab form or even untabbed form, mint or used. The popularity of stamps in Israel led to the creation of different souvenir items, and some publications resulted in the creation of souvenir leaves, as they were called, a limited number of different leaves with different subject matter, different motifs. And on some of the souvenir leaves that were issued each and every year, there were stamps, one or more stamps of the Doar Ivri issue that were on them. On the left, you see all 9 stamps for the Festival of Hanukkah. You see in different years, 1997, 1998, high-value Doar Ivri facsimiles on these souvenir sheets. Some people like pre-production material pertaining to the Doar Ivri issue. You have to be very careful when you're acquiring pre-production material, such as artwork, and to determine whether or not it's phony or whether or not it's actually genuine. The publication, which is the only publication on the subject, and it probably is definitive in its scope, was prepared by Bob Pildes, the extraordinary Holy Land collector, in which he cataloged artist drawings, essays, and proofs, pre-production material of the Doar Ivri issue, including the high values. And the publication also has some usages of the high value reflected within it. Now, if you really want to get wild and crazy about the Doar Ivri issue, you'll go for ephemera. You might have a coffee cup that will have the Doar Ivri high value stamps on it. And I'm sure Scott's got a cupboard full of t-shirts, with the Doar Ivri high values on them, that are out there. And if you really want to go far, you'll get a belt buckle with the high value Doar Ivri on it. That's probably rarer than some of the high value Doar Ivri stamps themselves, to actually find a belt buckle that is a creation of that first issue. But what do I collect? I'm interested in collecting postal history. I'm interested in collecting high value usages of the Doar Ivri. And this is an example of an extraordinary piece which has the 1,000 Doar Ivri high value with tab. Very, very difficult to find for reasons that I'll describe. So this presentation, after my introduction about the stamps themselves and what people like to collect, will deal with the Doar Ivri high value usages and the postal history associated with them. Why are there so few commercial usages of the high value Doar Ivris? And I'll show you usages of the 250, the 500, and the 1,000. But what's so interesting about this area of the Holy Land and the associated philately is that in between 1948 and 1950, other stamps were used to pay the postage that was needed to send mail to distant destinations. And that postage was used instead of the high value Doar Ivri stamps. So we're going to see some of those. Finally, I'm going to end the presentation talking about the successors to the high value Doar Ivri, beautiful stamps that people love to collect, classic Israel as they're called, the camel stamp, the menorah stamp, the road to Jerusalem stamps. And we'll see those. Those are stamps that were issued between 1949 and 1952. As Scott mentioned, the source of the presentation was the book that I prepared for the Society of Israel Philatelists. I was honored and privileged to have received a gold medal at Chicago PEX for the publication of this text. It was judged there, and it was an honor to receive that award. Now, whenever I do a presentation on philately or any other subject matter, I always honor those who provided me with the opportunity to speak on what I'm speaking, because they either provided me with material or they provided me with knowledge or both. And I want to acknowledge people such as Yaakov Sahor, Bob Pildes, Steve Rothman, Yaakov Shavtai, who has passed away, David Kaplan and Don Chaffetz at the Society of Israel Philatelists, and many other collectors who've passed on knowledge to me over the years and research, guidance, in order to prepare the materials that I'm showing to you today. I'm going to speak about the high values and their usages. And I mentioned I'm going to speak about commercial usages. I'm going to talk about rate studies that are associated with the high values. I'm going from time to time show you covers that you might consider to be of philatelic origin. Nonetheless, they pass through the mails. But principally, I'm going to be showing you usages of the Doar Ivri stamps on foreign heavy mail and parcels, domestic mail, documents to pay revenue charges or taxes, and mail that's to reflect postage due charges. I will say that I've had the honor and privilege of judging exhibits from other countries over the years where high value stamps are used on mail. And I can tell you it's a privilege to look at high value usages of stamps on mail of other countries other than Israel, because it gives me a sense that other collectors have the same ideas in mind, as you will see within this presentation. Now, one question that people often ask is, why are there so few high value stamps on cover? First of all, when people would get parcels, they often would toss away the wrappers. They would toss away the covering on books or on other commercial mail. So as a result, many high values, which were used on these parcels or I'll call heavy mail, were thrown away. In addition, in 1948, many collectors of the first issue of Israel and many dealers were involved in soaking stamps off the mail and putting them in their albums. For example, when I was a kid, we never talked about keeping envelopes around. We always were taught, oh, go soak the stamps off so you can put them in your albums. Well, that's what happened in Israel in 1948, 1949, 1950. In addition, there weren't that many high-value stamps that were actually issued on May 16th, 1948. It cost a lot of money to buy these high-value stamps because they were used on heavy mail. And you'll see what I'm talking about as we go along. In addition, starting in the middle of 1948, and when I say the middle, probably the fall of 1948 to be accurate, Israel started issuing postage due stamps. That was around May 30th, 1948, and revenue stamps. So the high values weren't used for a very long time to pay postage due or revenues. In addition, as I mentioned, postal rates didn't justify the usage of high-value Doar Ivri stamps except on mail that was going to certain foreign destinations. So domestic mail, surface mail didn't have or didn't attract postal rates such that the high values could come into play. Moreover, there were stamps other than the high-value Doar Ivri stamps that were issued beginning in the fall of 1948 that could be used to pay the same postal rates that the high-value Doar Ivri stamps would be used to satisfy as well. In addition, there weren't that many Doar Ivri stamps that were issued, but even though they were issued, some of the lower values of the Doar Ivri were also used to pay high-value postage. And I'm going to show you some examples of that in the presentation. Finally, one of the takeaways that is available here that you should take into account is that there are very, 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 very few tabbed high-value Doar Ivri stamps that are found on commercial covers. First of all, there are fewer stamps that are tab stamps on a sheet. Usually it's the bottom row of a sheet. So it might be 1/10 of a sheet, might be stamps that have selvage or tabbed values associated with them. So to actually find a tab stamp on a commercial cover is very, very rare. So now I'm going to go through each of the values and show you some examples of commercial mail associated with each of these stamps. The 250 mil stamp, dark green, thick white paper, medium white paper, has a specific perforation, which also might be found in a variety, either 11 by 11 or 10. But the point to note here is there were only 11,000 tabs. And given the fact that lots of collectors were trying to collect this issue in mint form or in used form with the tabs, or alternatively, there were people who didn't think the tabs had any value, so they were ripping them off. How many of these 11,000 tab stamps actually survived? And moreover, how many of these tab stamps actually found their way onto commercial covers? On May 16, 1948, Israel issued its first stamps, as I've mentioned already, and we saw a picture earlier of an official cachet sent from Tel Aviv with the 9 stamps, the Doar Ivri stamps. However, people created their own unofficial first day covers with the 9 stamps or a variation of the 9 stamps. And here's an example of a cover heavily overfranked, sent registered mail on May 16th, 1948. It's a domestic cover going to a soldier and is coming out of the city of Haifa. But you see the 500 and the 250, and you see all sorts of low value Doar Ivri stamps that are tabbed. There's no doubt that the sender was not sending a heavy parcel, because it would have been 130 times weight. It would have been some heavy book that might have been inside. Here's another example of an unofficial first day cover. And these are the Doar Ivri stamps used on a cover from Jerusalem. Now, unlike the first stamps of Israel that were available in Tel Aviv and in Haifa, for example, on May 16th, 1948, the city of Jerusalem was under siege, and convoys didn't get to the city of Jerusalem until June the 20th, 1948, and brought Doar Ivri stamps with them. On occasion, you will see a very, very rare usage of a Doar Ivri stamp before June 20th, 1948. But overall, supplies of the first stamps of Israel reached Jerusalem on that date. And this was a philatelic cover with all 9 stamps with their tabs marked with a postmark of the mail in Jerusalem. It was actually one of the interim postmarks that was used in Jerusalem at the time. But these were definitely put on at least around June the 20th, 1948. And that's also known because of the way the postmark is measured. The hammer was breaking up at the time, and people generally know the rough date at which the hammer was being used. Here's an interesting cover. Mail was often used the second time, or envelopes were used the second time because of shortages. Here's a cover that came from Kent, England, and it was sent to Limassol, Cyprus. And all of a sudden, the envelope is readdressed to Safed or Sfat in Palestine in the north of Israel. And it's a piece of domestic mail with a lot of postage on it, and 265 mils. And this is probably one of the highest, if not the highest, reported domestic usage of the 250 Doar Ivri on a piece of commercial mail that was sent within Israel. Parcels were also sent through the military postal system. And here is an example of 3 parcels. And this is a parcel card reflecting the mailing of 3 parcels, numbers 376 through C78. And what you'll see is it was sent from the city of Holon, which is near Tel Aviv, near Jaffa. And on the back of the parcel card, you will see usages of 300 mils reflected by 250, 220s, and a 10. And the postal rate for the parcels at the time was 100 each. So that's why you have so much postage on this parcel card. Hard to find parcel cards with that much domestic postage for a domestic destination, because this was sent from Holon to Jerusalem. Now we talk about international mail, really the mail for which the high values were issued. So here's an early registered envelope, which reflects 6 times weight, sent from Tel Aviv to Prague, Czechoslovakia. Some of you may know that Czechoslovakia was one of the first countries to establish airmail relations with Israel in May of 1948, June of 1948. So that's why you see high value usage coming out of Tel Aviv going to Czechoslovakia. Another example of a beautiful cover is found on this text dealing with the transition period in 1948. It's a beautiful piece going from Jerusalem to Princeton with high values on it, the 1,000, the 500, the 250, with that broken Jerusalem postmark. But it's actually a piece of commercial mail. And for all I know, it was somebody who was applying to Princeton in order to get into school, who was applying from Israel, or it was some other piece of research that was being sent. Beautiful, beautiful cover that's registered. Now you see an example of a 250 with a tab. Very difficult to find. Registered express coming out of the city, the northern city of Tiberias in August of 1948. And it's being sent to Chicago, Illinois. And you're going to see this name from time to time. Mr. Schur, Sidney Schur, was the president of the predecessor of the Society of Israel Philatelists at the time. He had a great relationship with various stamp dealers and various friends in Israel. And so he was lucky enough to be sent a parcel, or alternatively a heavy envelope, or an envelope with heavy contents registered. The postal rate is the correct one. You'll see it referred to on the side. It's triple weight expressed registered. Here's one of my favorite covers, going from the winery in the 4th largest city in Israel, Rishon LeZion, to Wellington, New Zealand. So not exactly a common destination for mail from Israel. And you see the 250 usage together with lower value Doar Ivris, including tabbed values. The envelope was opened up in New Zealand. You'll see the sealing tape around the edges of the cover. So it's a beautiful cover. It reflects proper registration. It reflects proper postage. And what's also historically interesting about this is that the sender, which was the winery in Rishon LeZion, paid for registration. However, at the time, there were no registration services between Israel and New Zealand. Similarly, at the time, there were no registration services between Australia and Israel, Canada and Israel, the UK and Israel, and that changed as Israel became recognized as a state by the United Nations. And when I say as a state, as a member of the United Nations in 1949. Here's another cover to Mr. Schur in Chicago, another tabbed example of a 250 full tab, some lower value Doar Ivri. And from time to time, and US collectors will be very familiar with this, you'll see notations as to whether or not envelopes were subject to customs duty. If they were, there might be a stamp that was put on to reflect payment of a parcel fee or customs. Sometimes mail passed free of customs. Here's an example going to Baltimore from Tel Aviv. Two 250s with full tabs, other Doar Ivri stamps with tabs, passing 3 through customs, 9 times weight, registered airmail. Now we're back to Tel Aviv to Chicago, going by airmail, registered to New York City, and it's a usage of the 250 with 2 lower value Doar Ivris. Some of you might think as you watch this presentation, oh, there's just tons of these high value Doar Ivris. I can tell you that probably most of the reported examples of Doar Ivri are reflected in this presentation, the high values, just to get a sense of how few they actually are. Here's a beautiful cover that was sent to the Firestone Company in New York. I'm sure a lot of you love the sealing wax on the back of the cover. This cover, which is shown on the right, reflects the appropriate airmail registered express rate going to New York from Tel Aviv. And you'll also see on the front of the cover the US affixed stamps to pay for the parcel fees, or the fees that were, some people would say they're postage due. Those are the stamps that are reflected there. When the parcel actually got to New York or the envelope got to New York. This was made into a beautiful poster as well. So you'll see a poster. If you love philatelic posters, it's a beautiful one on the left side of the cover that's on the right side. Now you'll see a cover going to Geneva from Tel Aviv, reflecting a 250 tab. Unfortunately, part of it was sheared off. You'll see a 1,000 usage. You'll see a 500. There are people who have looked at this cover and go, Ed, it's a philatelic cover. And I go, well, it went to a dental company in Geneva, Switzerland, and it paid a reasonable rate for purposes of carrying commercial mail. But even if it's philatelic, it passed through the mail, and it's a very nice usage of the 3 high values. Now we've got a 250 registered express, correct airmail rate, triple airmail rate, going to Mr. Schur, once again in Chicago, coming out of the city of Holon. Now let's go a bit further abroad. Doar Ivri goes to Australia, to the State Zionist Council of Victoria, out of the Israeli government, out of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs at double rate. The rate to Australia at the time in November of 1948 was 160 mils. This was 320. Now we're going abroad again. This is from the State of Israel, from the provisional government, going 250 mils, and it's going to England, 7 times weight in the circumstances, and nice usage of the 250. Going even further abroad and getting something even more exotic, Doar Ivri goes to Brazil. So we've got the basic rate of 75 mils going to Brazil. And this cover, including registration, is 4 times weight. You'll also see on the left side of the cover, censorship tape reflected in red and Hebrew on the white background. Now we're back to Mr. Schur in Chicago, and it's Tel Aviv to Chicago, 375 mils. This was obviously a parcel going to Mr. Schur, and how surprising, he's getting some stamps. You know, at least we know that that's the nature of the goods that are reflected on the declaration that's on the cover. Now, here's one you're not going to see every day. Doar Ivri goes to the Belgian Congo, and it's a 250 uses registered cover written in German, and it was double weight, a bit overfranked in these circumstances. But what's nice about this cover, there's a transit marking through Leopoldville in the Belgian Congo on the back of the cover. And I presume based on that it did get to Luluabourg in the Belgian Congo. Doar Ivri goes back to Australia, 250 usage, 3 times weight, a mixture of the 250 and lower Doar Ivris. Doar Ivri goes to France, and it's 16 times weight, but with registration. Here on the left, you're going to see a stamp we're going to see later in the presentation. It's a stamp for the road to Jerusalem. It was 250 mils as well. Doar Ivri goes to South Africa. There's the road to Jerusalem stamp, a beautiful 500 usage, a beautiful 250. And what's the fee in the circumstances? 20 times weight. It was probably a parcel of stamps. You see on the left side, the censorship red tape that's used to open up the parcel. Next, we've got Rehovot to Brooklyn. Rehovot being south of Tel Aviv, and it's going to a gentleman whose name appears on a lot of Holy Land mail, a very avid collector, Mr. Nat Peshkin. We should be very grateful to Mr. Peshkin and Mr. Schur and other collectors, because mail was sent to them that still remains with us today that allows us to understand what the prevailing postal rates were at the time. On the right side, we have censorship tape. We have U.S. Customs approvals or markings there. We have a 500 usage. And we have other stamps that are now being issued in 1949. This was to commemorate the founding of the colony of Petah Tikva. This is the 40 mil stamp or a Prutot stamp that you see there. Next, we have Rehovot to Braxpan, South Africa, where in 1949, we've got a holiday issue that's also joined by a 250 mil Doar Ivri stamp, and it's going to Sam Legator in Braxpan. Next, we've got another cover going to Mr. Legator with a 250 on it, probably postage stamps. Hananya Feinstein was a dealer in Rehovot. You'll see a bunch of mail sent. But what's so nice about this cover, aside from the fact you see the nice censorship tape on the side and the transit markings, you also have an arrival postmark in Braxpan. Back to Australia, Jerusalem to Sydney, Australia, express mail, single weight plus the express fee in the circumstances. So the cover was overfranked, but a nice usage. And why is this a nice cover as well? Another usage of the 250 with a tab. Now we're back to Chicago, 3 250s on mail, and mail such as this was sent by the Israel Philatelic Services. You'll see packages of stamps being purchased by collectors. And one thing that's so interesting about the Israeli government at the time, it was franking its mail to collectors with lots of high value postage stamps. So it's a beautiful cover to look at in and of itself. Here's another one of such covers sent by the Philatelic Services. You see the stamps for the commemoration of Israel's entry into the Universal Postal Union at the end of 1949. The stamps were issued in early 1950, but here's a 250 value usage. Now, you see the date of the postmarks on this cover were April 6, 1950. And I told you that on April 30th, 1950, the government withdrew the 3 high-value stamps from sale. So at the time, in April, May 1950, the government was starting to get rid of its surplusage of high-value Doar Ivri stamps and reflecting them on mail that was being sent to collectors. We'll see that as we go along. Now we're into parcels. I mentioned that Doar Ivri stamps were used on parcels or heavy mail. Here's a very beautiful usage on a parcel card going from Haifa to Copenhagen, Denmark, transiting Geneva, Padborg, and it's for 1 parcel. And what's also interesting about this parcel card, it was a parcel card that was used during the British Mandate, and it was overprinted State of Israel in both English and in French. So there was a usage of some excesses from the British Mandate period by the post office, including the usages of such parcel cards. I mentioned heavy mail. I mentioned airmail. I mentioned domestic mail. Now I'm going to talk about revenue usages. The high-value Doar Ivri stamps were used to pay for services. When you filed a court document, when you filed a commercial agreement, when you executed a commercial agreement, it was effectively a evidence of payment of fees for the creation of such commercial documents. So here's a power of attorney dated September the 6th, 1948, that not only has a revenue stamp, with the seal of a notary on it in Tel Aviv, but you see 2 high-value Doar Ivri stamps being used at the time. Next, here's an example of a lease from June of 1948 with the lessor and the lessee's signatures at the bottom and reflecting the fee for the registration of the lease or the execution of the lease, and that's high-value Doar Ivri. Here's an example of an insurance policy with both a revenue stamp and high-value Doar Ivri stamps to pay the revenue charges or the commodity tax, if you will, charges associated with the execution of the insurance policy. So I've taken you through the 250. Now I'm going to take you through the 500. Again, 110,000 stamps created, only 11,000 stamps with tabs that were printed. How many really exist on commercial cover? Well, you have covers such as this one, an over-franked domestic envelope that was sent as a first day cover, May 16th, 1948, registered from Haifa to Haifa. It's a philatelic origin, no doubt. It's not really likely carrying commercial mail, but it's a usage of a tab of the 500. Now we get into commercial mail, and we see Tel Aviv to the Bronx in New York, usage of a 500, and also postage dues in the circumstances added to cover customs charges. Tel Aviv to Rockaway, New York, and the usage of the 500, again, registered customs or oval, demonstrating customs passages. Next, Tel Aviv to Prague, August of 1948. Again, the relationship between Israel and Czechoslovakia was there at the time. A lot of commercial flights going between Israel and Czechoslovakia and back again. So this is a heavyweight cover, pays for registration, which was 15 mils at the time. Registration fees went up to 25 mils in October of 1948. Gadara to Johannesburg, South Africa. A cover that's seen better days. You've got foxing on the 500, but nonetheless, you've also got a lot of other postage. And in 1948, the first holiday issue of Israel was created with 5 different stamps, one of which was the 65 mil stamp. So you're seeing mixed franking in September of 1948 because you've got the holiday stamps being issued at the time. Here's another cover, Tel Aviv to Czechoslovakia, mixed franking, the first holiday issue together with the 500. There's the 10 value from the first holiday issue. And again, 14 times weight, registration went up from 15 mils to 25 mils. Here's one of my favorites now. We've got a 500 mil tab in the corner. Unfortunately, damaged, on the selvage, not necessarily on the tab selvage that much. Who's it addressed to? Mr. Sure. And what do we also see on this heavy parcel that was sent? We see Tetbesh, we see gutters, for the holiday issue, hard to get a hold of, mint, used, but now you see it actually on cover combined with the tabbed values, we call them colored tabs in these circumstances, of the first holiday issues. And there's a gutter pair of the 10s, 265s, a charge from customs in the circumstances, postage due, just a beautiful, beautiful piece, 31 times weight plus 25 mils registration. Here's a cover to a dealer in New York, Stolo, the 500 mil usage. You've got a label from the Jewish National Fund, complemented by other Doar Ivri stamps. Piece going from Israel, from Haifa to Lugano, Switzerland. It's a cutout, unfortunately, not full. There likely was additional postage that was there, given the Haifa postmark down at the bottom. It was a piece that was sent as a gift, registered. Why am I showing this to you? Because it's a very rare usage of the 500 on commercial mail in the circumstances with tab. Tel Aviv to Chicago. This is a piece of commercial mail. It's a piece that's not going to Mr. Sure. It's going to Amalgamated Trust and Savings Bank in Chicago at the time. Another tabbed usage of the 500. Now we've got the Road of Jerusalem being combined with the 500. I mentioned before, you're seeing mixed franking. Instead of having a 500 high value Doar Ivri and a 250 Doar Ivri, you've now got Road of Jerusalem complementing high value Doar Ivris. There's your postage due that we've seen before, with the legend to collect 10 cents postage due for custom services. Sometimes people would rip off, sadly, part of an envelope to preserve the postage. Unfortunately, it would have been nice if they preserved the entire envelope. This is going to London because of in all likelihood, because of the reference to W1 there. And you see low value Doar Ivri, a high value Doar Ivri, and the Road to Jerusalem. Now more commercial mail, First National Bank of Chicago, Express, dutiable, registered, censored. Very nice commercial postal history in the circumstances, pays 9 times weight plus 25 prutot of registration. Mr. Peshkin gets some more mail. He gets the 500 Doar Ivri, he gets the 250. And now we're seeing other stamps appear, the flags from 1949, the 20 prutot. So as we go along, we see high value Doar Ivri usage, the 500, complemented by other stamps that were issued. So instead of using all high value Doar Ivris, people started mixing postage, or people in the post office starting mixing postage. Another example of that, here is a tabbed value, very nice, going to South Africa, to the Zionist Council in South Africa. Low value Doar Ivris, right in the middle, 3 Road to Jerusalem's, 31 times weight in the circumstances. Now, Sydney, Australia will see the arrival of this envelope, this entire with a embossed 30 flag rather than the 20 that you saw on the actual postage stamps. And you see the 500 usage. It is not salvage. It's coming from the city of Hadera, registered in the circumstances. Then it's Tel Aviv to Santa Monica, California, 250, 500 Doar Ivri, lots of low value Doar Ivris paying 15 times weight. This was supposed to be a letter that was prepared for registration, to pay, and there it reflected some of the registration fee that was to be paid, but then the registration was annulled as the cross was crossed out, so to speak. Here's another one of my favorites. It's our chocolate wrapper, a wrapper of a chocolate that was going to Switzerland. And there's the 500 value, the 250 road to Jerusalem, and lower value Doar Ivri's. A piece that I found relatively recently, Haifa to Bremerton, Washington State. And it's 500 full tab, lower corner of the sheet, 6 times weight. Looks like commercial mail to me. Here's a piece coming from the Israel Philatelic ministry with the usages of the 500. And again, it's the ministry trying to use up its supply of high-value Doar Ivri's, February 27th, 1950, going registered. And here's a real late usage, 1952, usage of Doar Ivri. And I put this in to show you because the postal rates to the United States went up significantly after the beginning of 1952. So the rate in this particular case was 220 per tot, far different than 65, which was the starting airmail rate to the United States back in 1948. Parcel cards, here's a beautiful one, going from Jerusalem to New York, 4 instances of the high value Doar Ivri, 2 parcels, a 500 and some low values. I say in the slide that it's the 3rd highest recorded franking with Doar Ivri stamps. We'll see the highest ones as we go along. Here's a nice one, commercial mail or a commercial parcel card going from Shemen Works in Haifa to Macy's in New York. So you have to wonder what was being sent to Macy's from Israel in these circumstances. But if you're the philatelist, aside from noting that there's 1 parcel that was being sent, there's 4 high-value Doar Ivri's right in the top left-hand corner, and it was a 1 kilogram parcel that was being sent. And the postage 2105 is noted on the parcel card. I talked about revenue usages of the 250. Here's a revenue usage of the 500. This is on a share transfer document. Here's the usage of a 500 as a revenue stamp on a power of attorney. Here's a commercial lending agreement where security was being taken. And on that agreement, there's a 500 usage of the Doar Ivri. And on a promissory note, September 6, 1948, you've got the usage of a 500 there in these circumstances. Finally, a notarized agreement, November 1, 1948, as a revenue usage. And there's 550. Actually, there's a first revenue stamp that's also on the other side of this document. Now we move on quickly to the highest value, which is the 1,000, the kingpin of the high values, 11 by 11 perforation. There's other perforation that does exist, but it's a beautiful stamp, one that, when I was a kid, I would look longingly at, in people's albums or in pictures or otherwise, because it was such a colorful stamp. Here's an example of a piece of philatelic mail, but extraordinary because it's the usage of the 1,000 stamp on registered express coming out of HaKiryah, which is a suburb of Tel Aviv, where the government offices were. And this is addressed to David Remes, who was the Minister of Communications. And it was sent by the Philatelic Services, it says in Hebrew, in Tel Aviv. And here's the certificate of registration. This was the first item that was sent, likely, I would say, I'm sure it's a souvenir, but proper registration, way over frank, domestic mail, but an indication on July 11th, 1948 of the passage of this mail to the minister. An very unusual usage of the 1,000 prutot. It is a domestic piece of mail going from the Western Galilee, traveling post office to Jerusalem. The postal rate for sending this was far less than the 1,035 or 30 that you see on it. Unfortunately, somebody, I guess, needed to send a stamp. The rate was 45. They didn't have a 15. They had 1,000 in their drawer and they put it on. But the date of this is so extraordinary. It's 1953. So somebody had a high value kicking around that they needed to use for postage. Now we get to commercial airmail, Tel Aviv to London, United Kingdom, proper franking, proper rates, 39 times weight. I said it's proper rate, it's a bit over franked, but that's registration. Clearly commercial mail from shipping company to shipping company. Here's more mail going to Czechoslovakia with 1,000 high value registered airmail. A beautiful piece of a piece going somewhere in Europe, 3 high value Doar Ivris, 1,500, 1,250, very colorful piece, and customs declaration of value on this piece as well. Mr. Schur gets into the act for the 1,000. He gets something sent to him from Haifa, actually from a suburb of Haifa, Ahuzat Samuel, with the 1,000 censorship tape on the right. We've got Mr. Legator in Braxpan, South Africa in the act from the Israel Philatelic Ministry, registered mail, 2 1,000s, 1,500, June 2, 1949. Then we get Kazimir Bileski, the great Canadian dealer in Winnipeg, having mail sent to him from the Israel Philatelic Services, 2 1,000 Doar Ivris. Mr. Schur gets a piece that has a 1,000, 250, and a 500. Again, mail coming to him, airmail piece, not a full cover. Mr. Schur again gets a 1,000 and a 250 printed matter, could be philatelic articles, philatelic material. Because it's coming from the Philatelic Services, it likely could be stamps in the circumstances. And here we get to one of the gems of a classic Israel philately. It's the 1,000 tab usage going to Mr. Legator in Braxpan, South Africa, censorship tape on the left side as well, pays 24 times weight plus the registration fee. Just to be clear, there are only 2 reported usages of the 1,000 with tab on commercial cover. You'll see the second one coming up. This is a piece that's going from Haifa to New York in August of 49, registered. Another piece going to New York, not in the best condition, printed matter, registered, but you see the 1,000 down in the corner to help pay for the appropriate rate. And it was a different rate. It was 55 per tot as opposed to the usual airmail rate. A piece with 3 1,000s and a 500, road to Jerusalem, postage due for customs, registered, going from Tel Aviv to New York in 1949. Then we have a piece now, change of pace, going to Austria, from Haifa, 1,000, censorship by the Austrian censor seal over and tape over on the left side. Here is the second example of reported usages of the Doar Ivri tab, full tab on commercial mail. This is going from the Israel Philatelic Services. And look at the date, everyone. It's May 17th, 1950. The stamps ceased to be sold on April 30th, 1950. So wouldn't you be the lucky one to have the clear out sale from the Israel government of taking their 1,000s and 500 high value Doar Ivri and smacking them on commercial mail, selling Israel stamps to collectors. Wonderful piece as well. Now here is the second highest recorded franking of Doar Ivris. We've got 8 examples of the 1,000 mil or prutot Doar Ivri, August 31, 1950 in this case. And road to Jerusalem, Hebrew University, and it's going to Canada to Mr. Bileski. I talked about revenue usage. This is a tremendous piece of commercial mail. And when I say mail, it's not mail. It's a commercial document. It's a negotiable instrument. It's a bill of exchange. And this was for a fee payable of 3,450 mils in 1948 for the issuance of a bill of exchange with Doar Ivri, with Kofer HaYishuv, revenue stamps. So it is a beautiful piece. There are two known pieces that are bills of exchange which have the Doar Ivri stamps on them. Here is a bill of sale for a share transfer with high values, 1949. And this is the pièce de résistance. This is the piece, a bank letter of guarantee, 80,000 mil fee. It was issued to Steele Brothers by the Anglo-Palestine Bank. It's a bank letter of guarantee, October 1948. And I'm going to show you the front, which has revenue stamps and 5 high-value Doar Ivri stamps at the bottom. And bingo, there's the back of the document. You've got tons of Doar Ivri stamps, high-value stamps in the circumstances. So I've taken you through the 250, the 500, and the 1,000. Now quickly, I'm going to show you alternatives to the high values, because I've been showing you mixed franking all along. But instead of using high values, collectors chose to use other high values that existed at the time the Doar Ivri stamps were still on sale. So here's an example of using lower value Doar Ivri stamps to pay for a piece of registered commercial mail from Tel Aviv to Czechoslovakia. 375 mils, they could have used a 250, but they didn't. Here's another piece going from Tel Aviv to Santiago, Chile, and it's using a series of low-value Doar Ivri 50 mil or 50 Prutot stamps. And then when it gets to Chile, Chilean stamps are put on, and it's sent from Santiago to New York. Hakiria, Tel Aviv to Wilmington, Delaware, a nice piece of mail going to the US, 550s, making up 250 with tabs on the bottom. They could have put a 250 stamp on it, but they didn't. Here's a piece to Modesto, California, 275. They could have put a 250 on it, but they didn't. Talk about revenue usages. I've shown you beautiful revenue usages so far with high value stamps. Here's a share transfer document in 1949. And instead of using one high value stamp, they used 31 stamps that were low value stamps. They didn't even get all the stamps on the front. They had to put them on the back. Now we move on to different examples. This is the first holiday issue, and the highest value in that set in 1948 was 65 mils. And so you see here 780 mils of postage. They could have put a 250 on, high value Doar Ivri plus a 500. They didn't. Similarly, usages going to New York from Tel Aviv, all the holiday stamps. This, by the way, fantastic postal history showing you the rates. And so it's nice to see demonstrated usages of different stamps to pay postal history rates. But given the fact that I'm talking about high value Doar Ivri, I sure would have loved to see those high value Doar Ivris. But here's a piece going to Yugoslavia from Rishon LeZion, road to Jerusalem, tab usage of road to Jerusalem, full tab usage, very nice. Low value Doar Ivri, commercial mail, registered express going to New York, out of Tel Aviv, road to Jerusalem, low value Doar Ivri, postage due for customs. New York, going to a lawyer in New York, Mr. Neuberger, road to Jerusalem. Coins, second coin issue, plus Doar Ivri. Another one of my favorites, Tel Aviv to Manila in the Philippines, foreign service to foreign service. No high value Doar Ivri, 290 postage. Instead, lots of low value stamps to pay the freight. Another one, this is the Petah Tikva issue, 40, There's 400 mills of postage. They used coin stamps. They used Petah Tikva stamps. They didn't use the high values. Mr. Peshkin, he gets all that beautiful mail going to Brooklyn. He's got this lovely row at the top sheet of the 50 mil or 50 prutot Doar Ivri, plus the second holiday issue in 1949, but no high values. Parcel cards. Here's one going, a parcel going from Jerusalem to Hong Kong. Road to Jerusalem. Doar Ivri, lower values, second holiday issue, but no high value Doar Ivris. They were on sale at the time. Another example, why crowd an envelope with all these stamps when all you needed to do was put one 250 Doar Ivri prutot stamp? This is going to Montevideo, Uruguay. So visually interesting, lots of colors, lots of different stamps, but they could have put one stamp on to do the job. Now we've got the UPU, and we've got something coming from the Israel Philatelic Service going to New York, registered, but it's got UPU stamps on it. So now I'm into the last section of the presentation. We've seen mixed franking. We've seen no usages of the Doar Ivri high values when they could have been used. So now we've got the successors to the high values. In 1950, after April of 1950, what gets used? And we see lots of high value usages in 1951 and 52, because all of a sudden dealers started to say, boy, it would be great to get all these high value stamps on cover, not just to have them in plate blocks or full sheets. And postal rates were also going up. So the Philatelic Service issued 3 stamps with values of 250, 500, and 1,000 between June 25, 1950 and February 27, 52. There was inflation that was in Israel that was causing postal rates to increase at the time, and that's one of the reasons for these new stamps. The rates of postage, for example, from the United States, and I mentioned this before, increased up to 220 prutot. Europe increased to 110 prutot. Express fees went up, registration fees went up. So as a result, it cost a lot more money to mail a letter, and that's why they needed some more stamps. So these 3 successor stamps, I'm just going to show you very quickly, were the Bird's airmail, the Negev, and the Menorah. Beautiful stamps of what we call the classic Israel period. So here's the first one. Tel Aviv to Bucharest, Romania, November 26, 1950. You see 10 stamps. Road to Jerusalem, 6 birds with 250. Lots of postage going to Romania. But by the way, is that all the postage that was needed to send one parcel? Look at that. Did you ever see 2 parcel cards paying for 1 parcel of stamps? 1 and 2 going to Romania. Look at that postage, 16,000 prutot, a beautiful, unique parcel card. Then we've got the Negev issue, the beautiful stamp designed by Reuven, the artist in Israel. In 1950, going to Romania again, a parcel card filled with camels. Then we've got the beautiful menorah issue in 1952. We've got 11 menorahs on this parcel card, 3 roads to Jerusalem, only for 1 parcel. So you see how the postal rates escalated, 1952, 1951, 1953. And finally, we've got 11 menorahs on a tremendous parcel card going to Helsinki, Finland, out of Tel Aviv. We've got birds on it. We've got coins. We've got other stamps. If you want to know more about the topic, other than the book that I've written and I showed you earlier, there are different articles on the high values, but there isn't much literature on this subject. There are some articles and some books that I've noted. And with that, Scott, I'll turn it back over to you, and I'm happy to take questions as well.
Thank you, Ed. That was fantastic. I've got quite a few comments, questions that came in. Early on, you showed 9 denominations. The question is, which one is missing in this list? Are there more than 9 denominations that came early in the issue of these stamps?
Well, there's 3, 5, 10, 15, 20, 50, 250, 500, 1,000. And I showed all of those, I think. And if I didn't, I'll apologize because I'd have to go back because it's one of these things. If I missed everything from 3, 5, 10, 15, 20, 50, 250, 500, 1,000. So I did it on my fingers, so it must work. Must be 9.
I'll take you at your word.
Thank you.
I have a question here about whether or not we can get contact information for you and whether or not we can share the slides as well.
Well, typically, what I do is when the presentation is posted, people have, in effect, access to the slides, through the presentation. I'm happy to, I see Lance Bell sent that question, and I'm happy to talk to Lance or correspond with him by email, whatever works.
Okay.
You're welcome to give out my contact information for that reason.
A more personal question from Lance. Would love to know what led the speaker to collect Israel. In his case, his father and his uncle both had a collection, and now he has both of them. So what brought you to Israel, Ed?
Well, when I was in school, I collected different areas. Popular in the 1960s, whether or not it was the United States, United Nations. Being from Canada, I collected Canada, Vatican City, San Marino, everything that was colorful, had triangles. One of my teachers brought in his collection of Israel. It fascinated me. Being of Jewish heritage, was interested in the history and everything else, and that's how I got interested.
How do you display and store these envelopes?
I usually use acid-free sheets, that I put my covers in for that purpose, and then store them in albums. If I'm exhibiting, I'll mount them in the appropriate way that we would mount something and protect the covers with protective sheets.
The next question is an interesting one. How much was 1,000 mils in 1948 relative to, say, a person's wage or the cost of a loaf of bread or a car?
It's a good question, Dan. I think I worked it out relative to today's rates, and I think I had concluded, I wrote this at the beginning of the book, and I can't remember exactly what the number was because a friend of mine asked me something similar. I think it was the equivalent of a $2.50 stamp would have been putting $80 of postage on today on a piece of mail to mail. But I couldn't tell you relative to the cost of living how much the stamp cost. But I can tell you, given the fact that they didn't print that many of them and they were only used for high rate mail, if people were using them for low rate mail, they had money to burn, or they were interested in as good philatelists in spreading the word to different collectors. That's about all I could say on that one at the moment without speaking more definitively.
Were the rare early stamps only available in sheets or also in booklets?
They were not available in booklets. They were only available in sheets. And the sheets were broken up from time to time. You will see on occasion different dealers selling sheets that are still extant in the marketplace, but not common.
I've got another question here. I have a cover which states genuine stamps, forged postmark. Is this likely? Do you have an example?
Can you tell me that one again? Sorry.
The question is, I have a cover which states genuine stamps and a forged postmark. Is this likely? Do you have an example?
Of a forged postmark. You can have a forged postmark and you can have genuine stamps, but does it actually say that on the cover? And if somebody wrote that on the cover, that person must believe that the postmark was forged, or somebody told them that. I'd have to see it. If a person's wondering about it, they could get it expertized. There are fake postmarks that are around, no question.
Sure, we've come across that experience a few times. Any record of which post offices received the highest values? All, most, or only the large ones?
I think only the large ones did. What you'll see is, from my presentation, is that very few small locales were actually using the high values in those circumstances. Aside from Tel Aviv, Jerusalem, and Haifa, you saw covers from Rishon LeZion, close to Tel Aviv, close to, you'll see them from Jaffa. You see them from Holon, close to Tel Aviv, Gedera, relatively close to Tel Aviv. So I would think it's surroundings. You're not going to see mail in all circumstances. I showed one piece from the city of Tzfat, another one from Tiberias. So those are larger locations. I think if you find things from some of these smaller kibbutzim or moshavot, some of the so-called settlements that are there, it might be because somebody transported mail or stamps to that place. But I do not believe that those stamps were, at least the high values, were available in plentiful supply in the smaller places. And if they were, you don't often see them on mail.
Okay. For those interested in getting the book, Ed, and I'd like to provide a link in our YouTube for the rebroadcast of this, where would you get that? Through the SIP website?
Yeah, it's on the Society of Israel Philatelists website. It's under the Educational Fund, which sells the books. I think there's a link to publications on the website as well. You don't have to be a member to be able to access those publications. And proceeds go from the sale of that book, not to me, but to the Society of Israel Philatelists. I mean, it's that book was a labor of love, as all my other philatelic endeavors are.
And I will put in a pitch for a membership to the Society of Israel Philatelists. Even though I am the executive director of the APS, I'm also a proud member of the SIP, as are you, Ed.
Yes.
And I can't say enough good things about the journal, and I know our editor, Don Chaffetz, is on. I really appreciate the work that he does in putting the journal together. The website itself is phenomenal, and I think that you'll find a lot of good information there. So while you're listening, I'd also like to make an appeal for those of you who are not SIP members to please go to the website and consider joining today.
Yeah, thank you very much, Scott. Thanks very much. And thank you, everyone, for tuning in. I appreciate all the questions people have. Thank you for your kind remarks and questions. I always learn something from doing this. I learn things from other people when I do this. People ask me questions and I go, oh, wow, never thought of that. So it's fantastic.
I do have one more question in the Q&A box. Are perf 10s known on commercial mail?
Are perfins known on commercial mail? Are perf 10s? And I see, that George Bailey wrote that, and I'm thinking, I don't know the answer to that. That would be the kind of question that I would ask to one of the experts that I'm aware of. Thank you, George, for asking that question. But I don't know, I haven't measured my own, for example, to see whether or not I've got something.
Okay. Well, we are at the end of the questions, and I think we've covered a lot tonight. Ed, as always, I enjoy your presentations. It's a font of information, and I really do appreciate all that you do. And with that, I am going to say, if you missed any part of this, please visit the APS YouTube page to watch Ed's presentation, and feel free to share it with your friends. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the APS YouTube page for all of our future stamp chats and other video content. If you're not a member of the APS, Please join today and become a part of our stamp community. For more information, visit us at stamps.org. Thank you for joining us. Good night.
Bye, everyone.